On the morning of April 11th, 1862, while the nation was still waking up to the horrific news of the Battle of Shiloh only 4 days before, United States soldiers of the Division of the Army of the Ohio, commanded by Ormsby McKnight Mitchell, walked into Huntsville, occupying the city with no resistance. Mitchell's forces quickly spread throughout the entire Tennessee Valley of North Alabama. Mitchell bragged in a message to his boss, Don Carlos Buell, quote, "Thus in a single day we have taken and now hold 100 miles of the great railway line of the rebel Confederacy. We have nothing more to do in this region, having fully accomplished all that was ordered." End quote. But despite the appearance of success, Mitchell was cut off from support from the rest of the Army of the Ohio, who were preparing to besiege Corinth, Mississippi. The Army of the Ohio was overextended and didn't have the men to effectively control the region. To consolidate their hold on the Tennessee Valley, Mitchell abandoned positions south of the Tennessee River on April 24th, burning the railroad bridge at Decatur behind him. United States forces found themselves the targets of what in the 21st century is called insurgency. The regimental history of the 1st Ohio Cavalry described the situation. Quote, "The whole country was swarming with rebel cavalry, and skirmishes were of almost daily occurrence." End quote. Homegrown cavalry, operating stealthily, with familiarity of the local geography, were able to burn bridges, cut telegraph wires, sabotage locomotives, and make life difficult for the United States forces. Frustrations mounted as soldiers found themselves constantly harassed by an ever-present enemy lurking just out of sight, whom they never were able to meet in open fields of battle. Tensions erupted on May 2nd when a force led by Ivan Turchin sacked the city of Athens in retaliation for a relatively minor defeat. United States soldiers looted and vandalized private property and assaulted civilians. While the sacking of Athens was a striking example of violence directed against Southern civilians, officially the Army of the Ohio pursued a policy known as conciliation while occupying the Tennessee Valley in the spring and summer of 1862. This policy had profound and far-reaching effects, especially for enslaved people living in North Alabama. From the first moment Federal soldiers were on the ground in North Alabama in the spring of 1862, enslaved people escaped bondage to go behind Federal lines in an attempt to seek their freedom, as they did ubiquitously wherever the Federal Army set foot throughout the slaveholding South. The regimental history of the 37th Indiana described how, when Mitchell's force entered Huntsville, quote, "The colored people could not conceal their delight at seeing us and did not seem to try to do so." End quote. The presence of United States forces was a harbinger of liberation. However, the joy for many enslaved people, unfortunately, was premature. At this time, prior to the Emancipation Proclamation, the official policy of the United States government was to respect the private property of loyal citizens, and this extended to enslaved people who were still legally considered property. An enslaved person who offered intel to federal forces might be offered protection, and enslaved people whose enslavers were deemed disloyal could be seized as war material, which gave rise to the common euphemism contraband to refer to enslaved people during the war. But for enslaved people whose enslavers were deemed loyal, reaching federal lines was no guarantee of liberation. The chance remained that they might be returned to bondage, as the Army sought to leave peaceful, law-abiding, loyal Southerners as undisturbed as possible. In a stance that differed from the generally dismissive attitude held by the white officer corps in the United States Army at the time, Mitchell valued the intel and observations of the enslaved people who reached his lines, stating to the Secretary of War on May 4, 1862, quote, "The Negroes are our only friends, and in 2 instances I owe my own safety to their faithfulness. I shall very soon have watchful guards among the slaves on the plantations, bordering the river from Bridgeport to Florence, and all who communicate to me valuable information, I have promised the protection of my government." End quote. After Corinth was taken by the United States at the end of May 1862, the numbers of the Army of the Ohio and North Alabama exponentially increased as Buell moved east, intending to take Chattanooga.